Is finance still out of control? This on the day when heads of HSBC, the British bank, testifying before a Senate panel after it unveiled a report that showed widespread money laundering to places like Mexico and Iran. With us to talk about it, Thierry Philipponas, Secretary General of Finance Watch. Also with us, France 24 business editor Marcus Carlson, Fabrice Sémant of the Paris firm Lutetia Capital, and joining us from southwestern France, Ronald Freeman of the Atlantic Council. Just a comment from the France 24 debate Facebook page about the HSBC affair. Things like this from Wallona, things like this only fuel anti-corporate sentiment and in a way tell us that governments aren't in control, big money is. Well, adding kind of a twist to that is the fact that the man in charge during that period from 2004 to 2010 was Stephen Green. Stephen Green, who now happens to be the UK Trade Minister. Ronald Freeman, what do you think we were talking about the ripple effects before the break. Do you think there'll be political ripple effects over this HSBC scandal?
Well, there will always be political ripple effects. But bringing Stephen Green in as a minister harkens back to the time when Franklin Roosevelt very wisely made Joe Kennedy, one of the sharpest Wall Street operators of his day, head of the new SEC. He said no one can run the chicken coop better than an old fox. And it's Stephen Green's chance perhaps to redeem himself. He knows where the chickens are buried, if I may mix my metaphors. He could be very effective in this role.
Thierry Philipponas, do you agree?
I agree. I don't know Stephen Green himself, but the principle is right. I mean,
You're yourself a former trader.
In a way, yeah. I'm not supervisor nor regulator, but I was a banker for 20 years and a trader for a long time. So yeah, I know some of the tricks.
And that was the reasoning when they brought in Timothy Geithner to be the Treasury Secretary as well, saying when it comes to helping push through legislation, let's get somebody who's worked closely with the people on Wall Street. How well did that work?
Well, the limit to the game is, basically the revolving door system. Because, if it's a case of you're a banker, you become a supervisor or a minister or regulator, whatever, and then you go back to banking and you obviously have a conflict of interest, that doesn't work because human nature being what it is, it simply doesn't work. If it's a case of someone who knows the industry from inside and who's dedicated to working for the public good, I would say, then it makes sense. Difficult for me to comment on Geithner, but something is clear is that the U.S. system is very much geared towards the investment banks, and some investment banks, in particular Goldman Sachs, are very well wired into the administration. And I would say all administration. It was true under George Bush. It's still true under Barack Obama. And that is a problem because you cannot have, if you mix the two interests, at the end of the day you don't get what you need to get. I mean, public interest is not just the sum of private interest. It is something else. It is about something else. It's just not about making money for a particular private firm. So that's essential. So if you have people at the helm who just have private interest in mind, you know what you get, and that's what you were referring to. Ronald Freeman was referring to the invisible hand paradigm, which is don't regulate. If you regulate, you're not going to get anywhere, and the market will self-regulate, and you don't need to do anything. That is something which is basically a preconceived idea, which is far from being proven, to say the least, and to put it mildly. But that has prevailed because you had investment bankers, running, the public side of the show.
And that's quite topical again across the Atlantic over in Britain this Tuesday. Bob Diamond, the head of Britain's second largest bank, stepped down earlier this month after it came to light that traders at Barclays were talking down, up or down, according to the situation, the LIBOR, the rate at which banks lend money to each other. Now, Diamond's CEO, Jerry Del Messier, this Tuesday passing the proverbial buck, or pound in this case, telling a UK Parliament panel he told staff to fiddle with the LIBOR after a conversation that Diamond had in 2008 with the Bank of England.
Mark, I mean it. Well, at the time, sir, it seemed appropriate given everything that was going on. Again, the Bank of England, in its role as responsible for the stability of the system and with oversight and expertise across the whole of what was going on in the markets.
Marcus Carlson, has there been a cozy relationship again between Bank of England, Barclays, and regulators in the past?
Well, that is the question. That is what the Treasury Select Committee that was just we just heard that testimony in. That is what that is looking into, after all. But it certainly seems as if there are some questions to be answered when it comes to the behaviour of UK authorities, because time and time again in all of this, that London is coming into focus, because JP Morgan, we spoke about the London whale scandal before, in which JP Morgan now says that it lost $5.8 billion at least. London was at the centre of that, and its chief investment office of JP Morgan, which is based in the British capital, then Barclays scandal, the LIBOR scandal, and now HSBC, which is, after all, based in London. So it certainly seems as if there's a lot of red threads, if you will, running back to the British capital. So there's a lot of questions there to be answered by British regulators. That includes the Financial Services Authority, the Bank of England as well, of course. And we also heard from Mervyn King, the head of the Bank of England this Tuesday, in the Treasury Select Committee, in that parliamentary committee. And he said that he didn't know about the LIBOR scandal, for instance, which I think a lot of people within the financial industry will consider fairly unlikely, seeing that this has been up for discussion and it's been up for debate a number of times in the past few years.
He said he didn't know about the LIBOR scandal, but he did tell that panel, Mervyn King, the boss of the Bank of England, that back in 2008, there was the then head of the New York Federal Reserve, Timothy Geithner, who we were just speaking about minutes ago, who raised concerns that were passed on to the BBA, the British Banking Authority. But both King and his deputy, again, insist they did not at the time suspect deliberate wrongdoing.
We were very concerned about this piece of global infrastructure losing credibility. As the governor said, we urged the BBA to review everything, in particular its governance, and to do so on a global basis. But no, it didn't. It didn't set off dishonesty alarm bells.
The penny didn't drop that the phrase deliberate misreporting might imply some degree of dishonesty?
No, it didn't.
It did not. Ronald Freeman, is that a disingenuous answer?
It's a clever answer under the circumstances. We all remember what 2008 was like, and you can well understand the concerns of regulators for the market not to perceive that one of Britain's biggest banks, Barclays, was beginning to suffer in the marketplace by a rising cost of funding. And since LIBOR reflects the actual cost of funding of banks, they wanted to keep things calm. In retrospect, it looks awful, but at the time, I'm sure it seemed the wise thing to do.
Does that ring true to you, Thierry Philippe?
Yes, it does. It does. But the essential problem, and that takes us back to what we were saying earlier, is that the banks have developed a feeling of we're so large, we're so important for society that whatever is good for us will be good for society, and therefore we're entitled to do what is good for us. And that is the heart of the problem. And let me ask you a question. Why do investment bankers make so much money? Is it because their social utility is greater than anyone else's? Is it because they're more clever than anyone else? Or is it because the game is rigged in their favor? Well, I think we all know the answer. The game is rigged in their favor. And why is it rigged in their favor? Because they've acquired that power, because they're so large, so big, so unmanageable that no politician will ever dare touch them. I shouldn't say will never, ever do it. But, the essence of the question today is the willingness. I mean, we're all lucky enough to live in democracies, and therefore the question is the willingness of our legislators and our politicians to tackle the issues head on. And the issues is that we need banks. We do need banks. There's no doubt about that. But we need banks that are manageable, that could be allowed to fail without, taking society down with them, and that can be controlled with properly staffed and strong supervisors.
Fabrice Simon?
I have a question for you. Why do a soccer player win so much money? Even though investment bankers, I mean, I used to work for the government, so I never been an investment banker. But I think first of all that they are winning less, and it is good, but they are winning less and less money. But why do soccer player earning so much? You don't think it's scandalous to have like this transfer, like PSG just 14 million euro per year salary for somebody kicking in a ball?
It's funny because
Zlatan Ibrahimovic had a better season, though.
That's an argument I've heard many times. As far as I'm concerned, there's absolutely no problem with making money and even making a lot of money. Entrepreneur starts a company, Bill Gates become the richest man in the world. As far as I'm concerned, I have nothing to say about that. Well done. You contributed, you made millions of people or thousands millionaires themselves, your staff and everything.
Soccer players don't really match this description. Am I wrong?
No, but what I'm saying is that I'd like to return the question to you, because I don't mind talking about soccer, but we could talk about advertisement, or there's many jobs that can make very good money. So I don't think it's the point. The point is, why do investment bankers make so much money? And to me, the answer is absolutely obvious. It is because they're operating in that too big to fail environment. There's a huge funding subsidy coming to banks thanks to that too big to fail environment. And that huge funding subsidy enables them to play that game of heads I will, tails you lose. And if I play heads I win, tails you lose, making money is not that difficult.
The answer to your question is because they used, I'm not saying it's good, but the answer to the question, why did they make so much money, is because they generated a lot of money.
Yes, but the problem,
so they had a cut, some of them actually a direct cut on what they were making or what they were making the bank win.
Okay, I completely agree with that. So I completely agree with that, but that's part of the story. The full story is, is the money they're making legitimate? And to me, money is made legitimately when you make it in a transparent, fair manner, and you contribute to the wealth and the prosperity of your customers. Okay, if you do that because you're non-transparent, you're hiding from a number of people, and you're extracting a rent from society, then I have a problem with that. Someone makes 100 million of whatever currency next year because he did a very good job with his or her customers, well done. If that same person makes 100 million because he took that money from society without telling anyone and with hiding effectively, then I have a real problem. And that's the essence of the issue with the banking system.
We mentioned at the top of the show how banks say one thing to the public and another to big clients, like hedge funds. There was an article on the matter in the New York Times and the Herald Tribune. And right now there's a huge amount of anger in the United States over the initial public offering for Facebook, where big Wall Street banks, there were 3 of them, talked up the stock before it went public, only to see it slide once it was floated. Again, there's this feeling that, Fabrice Simon perhaps, that the banks say one thing to the general public, like with the rates scandal that we're seeing in the UK, and another thing to their powerful friends.
No, it is true that some of them, and there are a lot of excesses, and those excesses needs to be corrected, and
through regulation.
Through regulation, but the problem in a way is that the whole industry, the industry as a whole, is actually basically harmed by the attitude of a very few number of people. So let's say 80% or 85% of people working in finance worldwide are honest people who are investment bankers, who are actually allowing and advising Procter & Gamble on its next merger, and who are spending countless hours to make sure that this merger is going to go through. Those people have a use to society. People who actually are raising money for small companies or small companies that want to develop and raise money even through the market, those are they are useful.
So is Thierry Philippon right? That the idea isn't to get rid of banking, but the idea just to make banks a smaller size, more manageable?
Absolutely. I've always been in favor of a Glass-Steagall Act. And the reason why the Glass-Steagall Act was abolished to allow the merger between Citi and Travelers at the end of the 90s in the US was simply because our American friends were saying and to their MPs, listen guys, in Europe you have so-called universal banks that are allowed to do the whole spectrum of the activities, and we are not playing on an even playing field. And that's precisely the reason why I said from the beginning that the most important is not regulation. Regulation is important, it is needed, but it is global regulation.
And Marcus Carlson, we've seen some forms of regulation when it comes to how much money they have to keep in the vault, this kind of thing. But when it comes to these issues that keep creeping up in a more and more spectacular fashion, any sign that there's going to be that global regulation?
Well, I mean, there's talk about it now, but the question is, though, still, and just to add another layer onto all of this, is who's watching the regulators, who's regulating the regulators, because that seems to have been the problem. For instance, when it comes to Barclays, there are now suspicions, there is an investigation ongoing whether or not this was actually against the law. So there are laws against these kind of things. There were laws at the time of manipulation, when Barclays manipulated LIBOR rates, there were laws against it, after all. Yes. Same thing for a lot of things. So the problem, it seems, could be the regulators as well. And that was something that came up once again in the US Senate hearing this Tuesday. There was also criticism of the regulators in the United States that they perhaps are not doing their jobs well enough, and that there is this cozy relationship between the two sides. And that, once again, is where Stephen Green, the UK Trade Minister, comes in.
All right. And when we asked why finance is still out of control on Twitter, our good friend Stéphane de Vries replied, because bankers are more dangerous than psychopaths. Now, I thought that was a cheap shot, but in fact, he pointed to an article on alternet.org that points to a study from Switzerland's St. Gallen University. The researchers pitted a group of stockbrokers against a group of actual psychopaths in various computer simulations and intelligence tests, and found the money men were significantly more reckless, competitive, and manipulative. Fabrice Simon, come on, what's the answer to that?
Again, I'm not a banker, I'm a fund manager, so it's not exactly the same, and I run a very small business. We're 10 people in our team, so it's I find myself more...
but they're not that dangerous.
Some of them are, some of them are, and I think it's pretty much in any job the same thing.
We'll have to have you back to sort the wheat from the chaff. I want to thank you, Fabrice Simon. I want to thank Thierry Philipponnat as well, Marcus Carlson, and Ronald Freeman for joining us from Albi in southwestern France. And thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.